Today we'll be learning the first Sicha of Chukas on Likkutei Sichos, Chelek, volume 13. And the Sicha is centered on the first words of this week's Parsha. It says that Hashem spoke to Moshe and he told him, Zois Chukas HaTorah, this is the Chukah, the statute, the law of Torah. And the Torah then proceeds to talk about the mitzvah of Parah Adumah. As I believe we've spoken in previous Yurim, when we learn a Sicha, so there's the specific idea that the Rabbi is talking about, and the question, the answer, the lesson, and the message. But there's always the deeper message and the deeper idea, meaning that when you look at a Sicha, you also get a glimpse of some of the Rebbe's larger views and some of the Rebbe's largest emphasis in different areas of life. And in every Sicha, there's 1, 2, 3 of these themes which are recurring themes in the Rebbe's Torah and ideas which the Rebbe accentuated. And one of them that we find in this week's Sicha is the Rebbe points out the obvious fact, which is that the mitzvah of Parah Adumah, which was that we know that when a person comes in contact with a dead body, so they become tameh, and then there's the process of tara, the process of purification, entails taking a Parah Adumah, a red heifer, and burning it and mixing the ashes with water, and then the sprinkling of those ashes, that mixture of ashes and water, on the person who is tameh, beforehand was tameh, and then that makes him tired, then the person becomes pure. Now, the halachas of Tumah and Tara, the halachas of purity and impurity, which are an extensive subset of halacha. If you look in the Gemara, you look in the Rambam, so for the most part, are not applicable today. We don't have the halachas of Tumah and Tara. There's no such thing as the Parah Adumah anymore today. So the question then becomes, why are we learning these halachas? Yes, we know it's Torah, but what is the point of learning these halachas? So we have this concept of the Torah being siches, which means that the Torah is eternal. But what does that mean? What does it mean that the Torah is eternal if there are many, many parts of the Torah which are not applicable and not practicable today? So on a very simple level, you can make the argument, Torah Nitzchus, the Torah is eternal, meaning that every mitzvah of the Torah is theoretically applicable at any time. Certain circumstances have to be met. There has to be a Beis HaMikdash. Well, Mashiach were to come right now. If we were to do tshuva, Mashiach were to come, then all these halachos would once again be in practice. So it's the Torah is eternal in theory. In other words, in theory, every mitzvah could be applicable if certain circumstances were to be put into place. For example, if I went around the whole day today and I didn't find a Aveda, I didn't find a lost object, are you going to say, therefore, that the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, returning a lost object, isn't eternal because it didn't apply to me today? No, the circumstances, they just didn't appear, but theoretically they could appear. That's on a very simple level. But you want to go on a deeper level. On a deeper level, you can say, yes, there are certain mitzvahs that they're not actually, we can't do those mitzvahs today. That is true. But nevertheless, every single part of Torah has lessons for us. So even though that we don't have a Parah Adumah today, but there are lessons that we can derive from the mitzvah of Parah Adumah, and that also makes that the Torah is nitzchis, that Torah is eternal. But from that understanding, to be clear, that means like this: the Torah gave us a mitzvah of Parah Adumah. The actual mitzvah which the Torah gave us is not applicable today. However, we can draw some lessons about Avodas Hashem and the service of Hashem, whether it be Adam Lamakim, Adam L'Chaveri, between us and Hashem, between us and our fellows. We can draw lessons, but the mitzvah itself, the actual intent of the mitzvah, still isn't nitzchi, isn't eternal, and is dependent upon certain conditions to be able to be fulfilled. The way the Rebbe looks at Torah, which is based obviously on many the works of many before him, is that when we say Torah is nitzchis, it means that the actual mitzvah is also eternal, and let me explain what that means. There's a famous shalah which says that the world makes the mistake of thinking that the Torah is midaberes betachtoinim umiramezes b'elyonim, which means that the Torah is essentially talking about physical matters. However, in Torah also you will find allusions to spiritual matters, to things that involve higher worlds and higher spiritual realities. And the Shalah says that this is a mistake because the truth is the other way around. That Torah really starts off as a spiritual entity. Torah also alludes to the physical world. So if viewed in this way, then we understand that Torah is nitzchi, the idea that Torah is eternal. That means that the Torah, the wisdom of Hashem, as it applies in every single level, including the spiritual levels, including in our Avodas Hashem, is as relevant today as it always was. There is one element of that mitzvah, which is a very important element, 100%, but which is the actual physical application of that mitzvah, which today we are deprived of. Yirtzeh Hashem, Mashiach will come very soon, we'll be able to do that also. But it's not as if the mitzvah the idea doesn't exist and only it alludes to things. The concept as it is in the spiritual realm exists always. And therefore, every single thing that we learn in Torah, we always have to ask, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to me in my spiritual service of Hashem? And that is very much the intent of that mitzvah which we are learning about. So Parah Aduma, again, we don't have the Parah Aduma, but the messages in Parah Aduma are as relevant today as ever. And those are the spiritual backdrop to the physical mitzvah. The pasuk, again, as we said earlier, the parsha begins with the word Zois Chukas HaTorah, which means this is the Chukah of Torah. It is well known that the mitzvahs in general are categorized in three different categories. There's Eidos and Chukim and Mishpatim. Mishpatim are mitzvahs that are logical, 100% logical, so logical to the extent that if they had not been given in the Torah, we would still know them by logical deduction. Not to murder, not to steal, kibbud avim, etc. And then there are those mitzvahs that are called eidos, which are also logical, although we wouldn't be doing them had the Torah not told us to do them. So, for example, keeping Pesach or putting on tefillin or a mezuzah, they're logical mitzvahs, but we do them because Hashem told us to. And then there's the genre of mitzvahs which is called mishpatim. Mishpatim are those chukim. And chukim are those mitzvahs which are completely above and beyond seichel, above and beyond logic. And we know that the ultimate chok is para aduma. So therefore, when the Torah says zois chukas HaTorah, this is the chok of Torah, this is the super rational mitzvah of Torah, and moves on to para aduma, it would seem that the chukas HaTorah applies only to the mitzvah of para aduma. But the Rebbe points out in the Sichos that the words zois chukas HaTorah, and the Rebbe supports this from a Medrash Tanchuma and the pasuk, that the word Zeis Chukas HaTorah is not only a reference to Parah Aduma, but in general, the entire concept of Tuma and Tara, of purity and impurity, is one big chok. Zeis Chukas HaTorah, the ultimate chok in Torah is the idea of purity and impurity. And just to quote two of the Mamari Chazal, which the Rebbe brings in the Sicha, one of them is from the Medrash Tanchuma, where the Medrash Tanchuma says, Loi hamis mitama, v'loi hamayim mitarim. It's not that a dead body makes a person spiritually impure, and it's not that water is purify a person. Ella Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, rather Hashem said, Chuka chakakti, I enacted a decree. Diksiv, as the pasuk says, Zois Chukas HaTorah. So we see that the idea of chok is not only limited to Parah Aduma. The whole concept of Tuma and Tara, of Tumas Meis, the idea that a person comes in contact with a dead body, there's a concept of Tuma, is not something which is logical. The Rambam also says something similar. The Rambam says, Davar barer ugoli. It's an obvious and clear thing. Sha'atumais v'hatares gzeiras hakosovim. All the tumas and all the tares, all the different forms of tuma, and all the ways that a person becomes tahir, they're all a gzeiras hakosov, a decree of the Torah. Ve'enon medvarim shadaiti shala'adam machra'atay. These are not things that the human mind can arrive at on its own. These are included in the laws of in the genre of chukim. As the Rambam says, tuma, it's not some sort of dirt or filth that the mikvah removes. It's something which is spiritual and something which we can't really understand fully what it is. So tuma and tara is a chok. And regarding the chok of tuma and tara, the Torah tells us in the beginning of this week's parsha, zois chukas HaTorah. This is the chok, the statute of Torah. As Mefarshim point out, the Rechaim and others, why does it say Zois Chukas HaTorah? It should say Zois Chukas HaPara. This is the choik, the mitzvah that involves the para aduma. Or zois chukas tuma v'tara. What is zois chukas atera? So it's explained in Chassidus in different places that zois chukas atera, the para aduma in particular, and tuma and tara in general, they are a choik, but this is a choik which is really present in the whole Torah, in every mitzvah of the Torah. Every single mitzvah of the Torah has present within it the element of choik, to the extent even to the degree of tuma and tara and the para aduma. However, it is most revealed in para aduma. The choik aspect of the mitzvah is most revealed in para aduma, most revealed in tuma v'tara, in the larger sense. And that's why we say zois chukas haTorah, so that when you're learning the mitzvah of para aduma with the choik of para aduma, you're supposed to realize that really whatever we're learning over here and whatever understanding you have in para aduma, or whatever understanding you have in tuma v'tara, really applies to every mitzvah in the Torah. And how is that? All mitzvahs, all the 613 mitzvahs, they all come from Hashem's ratzon, from Hashem's will. And when we're talking about Hashem's ratzon, we have to be very clear. We're talking about a ratzon which is higher than seichel, higher than reason, higher than logic. Hashem wants it. Is there anything that you want which is not logical? But you want it. There is no reason necessarily. It's a very, very deep-seated desire that you have. Hashem has a desire, an illogical desire that every single one of us, that every Yid should do all 613 mitzvahs. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the mitzvahs end up being illogical. We know that many of the mitzvahs have very good reasons for them. But think for yourself for a moment. If there's something that you really deeply desire, so it's very possible that afterwards you process them in your mind and you make sense out of it. And actually you can give a good reason for why you want it. But ultimately the reason is because you want it. It's because you have that will, you have that ratzon, you have the desire. And the logic behind it was added on later. Or in the words of Chassidus, after it originated, this idea originated in your ratzon, it also was nislabish, it entered the seichel, and now it makes sense. So most of the mitzvahs originated in Hashem's ratzon. They originated in Hashem's absolute desire. Again, not a desire which is a logical desire, but this is what Hashem wants, which is really the strongest expression of Hashem, because whenever something is logical, as we'll see soon, stronger logic and weaker logic, a little yes, a little no, you can make excuses, maybe you can find a substitute, but this is Hashem's deepest ratzon. Every single mitzvah began that way. Now, the mitzvah of para aduma, as well as the other mitzvahs of the other halachas of tuma v'tara, they never left their original state, which is being Hashem's ratzon. They never entered Hashem's chachma. And therefore, as they come to us in Torah, they remain Hashem's pure ratzon, which is why we don't understand them. They make no sense to us. Whereas many of the other mitzvahs, they entered Hashem's chachma. However, when we do a mitzvah, every mitzvah, why are we doing the mitzvah? We're doing it because that's what Hashem wants us to do, not because of the reason. Even though there is a reason, and even though we understand the reason, and even though Hashem wants us to understand the reason, which is why He gave us the Torah with the reasons, but when we make a mitzvah, when we do a mitzvah beforehand, we make a bracha and we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, who has sanctified us with His mitzvahs and commanded us. Ultimately, we're doing it because it's a command, because it is Hashem's ratzon. Now, what does it make a difference whether a mitzvah is purely Hashem's ratzon, or whether we're doing it because because of the reason behind it? There's a very big difference. And we alluded to this earlier. When you have a desire which is based in logic, based in a reason, I want something and there's a logical reason why, how strong is your desire? As strong as the reason is. So therefore, some things you want less. Some things you want more. Why is that? The things you want less is because the reason for wanting them is a weaker reason. If you want something more, it's because the reason for wanting them is a stronger reason. And in In logic also, so if I want something logically and I succeed a quarter of the way or a third of the way or half of the way, okay, so what I want is 1/4 or 1/3 or 1/2 fulfilled. But what if I want something and there is no reason why I want it? It's just what I want. It's my deepest desire. It's irrational, but that's what I want. And let's say I want 5 things. Can we say that I want one more than the other? There is no reason why the will should be here stronger than over here. It's only about me and my desire. My desire is equally the same everywhere. Again, the gradations in Ratzon, the levels of intensity in Ratzon only applies to a Ratzon which is based on Tam V'das, which is based in reason. So because all mitzvahs are essentially Hashem's Ratzon, what that means is that essentially all mitzvahs are the same. Every mitzvah is because Hashem wants. And in Hashem's want, in the words of Chassidus, there is no hischalkos, there is no difference, there is no weaker, there is no stronger. It's all 100% Hashem, absolutely His desire, and He has a 100% desire for them. Which explains an interesting idea. You know, when you do mitzvahs, and you learn halacha, so we have, okay, if you did the mitzvah, you do this and this and this, you're Yetzah. You fulfill the mitzvah. You did this and that, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. What's interesting is that you'll never find a halacha which says that you did the mitzvah halfway. It's like being half pregnant. Either you did the mitzvah or you didn't do the mitzvah. You're Yetzah or you're not Yetzah. There are certain aspects that if I did those aspects of the mitzvah, I did it. And then I did it 100%. Maybe it wasn't muhudr. Maybe I missed out on hiddur mitzvah, which is the beautification of a mitzvah. And if I didn't do the essential parts of the mitzvah, there is no halfway. There's no such thing. Oh, Kiddush, because you did it this way. You did half the Kiddush. Make another half a Kiddush and you're good. There's no such thing. You did it or you didn't do it. And why is that? Because that is characteristic of what Ratzon's all about. Ratzon is, I want it. If I get it, I'm happy. I don't get it, I'm not happy. There is no halfway. Halfway is only if there's a reason. So if half the reason was fulfilled, then I'm half happy. But that's only in the seichel of mitzvahs. But because mitzvahs are essentially Hashem's Ratzon, it's an all or nothing proposition. And the Rebbe says that this idea, the idea of the all or nothing in a mitzvah, the all or nothing element in it, it's the Ratzon, either you're doing Hashem's will and connecting to Hashem or not. We see it in Tumah and Tara more than any other area in Torah, which is why we say by Tumah and Tara, Zois Chukas HaTorah. Because in Tumah and Tara is a snapshot really of what every mitzvah is all about. If we talk about Tumah as being a negative influence, something which is spiritually unhealthy, spiritually not good for us. So let's say I come in contact with something which is tameh. How tameh do I become? What if I touch something only with my hand or with my foot? So does only my hand or only my foot become tameh? No. You are either tameh or you're not tameh. Either your entire body is tameh or your entire body is tahir. Which again represents the absolute nature of Hashem's Ratzon, the choik in mitzvahs. You did the mitzvah, you didn't do the mitzvah. You did the mitzvah, you connected to Hashem. You didn't do the mitzvah, you didn't make that connection. There is no halfway in it. Moreover, how did you touch it? Did you touch it with your fingernail? Or did you hug it? Did you marinate in it? No difference. There's no such thing as more tameh or less tameh. There's no such thing as, oh, I'm 20% tameh, or I have this degree of tameh. Again, it's all or nothing. Think about it. In a spiritual sense, you would think, if I come in contact with something which is undesirable, so how deep was my contact? The more I was in contact with it, the deeper I was in contact with it, the greater my impurity should be. The more I'm immersed in something which is unholy, the more unholy I am. You can't compare me touching with a finger as me diving into it head first. But in Tumah V'Tara, it's all the same, which again reflects the idea of the Ratzon which is in mitzvahs. Moreover, the Rebbe says, you know, when I say about, did I embrace it? Did I hug it? Did I slather myself in the Tumah? Or did I touch it with my finger? No difference. That's a physical, you know, how much did I come in contact with it physically? Let's talk about it spiritually for a second. What if I went and I touched the tameh thing? I touched that which is tameh, and I touched it willingly with a lot of desire and eagerness, as opposed to someone pushed me into it. So spiritually speaking, you can't compare those two encounters. One is an unwitting encounter, one is by mistake, and one is with all of myself. There's no question that in a spiritual sense, when I willingly and with a great desire embrace something which is impure, that's a much closer connection than when I did it inadvertently or by mistake or I was forced into it. But once again, in Tumah, we find no difference over there. And lastly, when someone becomes Tameh, they become completely excluded from that which is holy. They can't walk into the Beis HaMikdash, period. They cannot eat anything which is holy, any Truma or any Kodesh, which again, it shows this complete separation from Hashem. And this is a very important understanding in terms of mitzvahs and in terms of averis. The essence of what a mitzvah is a commandment, Hashem's ratzon, and when you fulfill the mitzvah, you become connected to Hashem, as alluded to in the word mitzvah, which is related to the word savsa v'chibur, which means a connection. When you do a mitzvah, you are 100% absolutely connected to Hashem. There is no difference between one mitzvah and another mitzvah. Every single one of them is Hashem's ratzon. Every single one of them, you do them, you connect to Hashem. And the same is true, chas v'shalom, with impurity. You do an avera, it doesn't make a difference what avera you've done. Avera is the opposite of a mitzvah. You are avanisechem hayum. On a conscious level, you have detached yourself from Hashem. There is no difference. There is that absolute quality to mitzvahs. Now, some of you might be thinking, really? So there really is no difference between one mitzvah and another? There's no difference between keeping Shabbos and washing Negelwasser? There's no difference in eating a cheeseburger and a little Lashon Hara that I said, or another small little Avera that I did? The answer is there is a difference. The Rebbe talks about this in Tanya, in Perik Chav Beis of Tanya. The Rebbe says like this. He says, when you do a mitzvah, there's a fringe benefit. In addition to the essential connection to Hashem, there are benefits that you get for your neshama, for the world. And in that, yes, there are differences between one mitzvah and another. When you do an avera, you cause damage to your neshama, and you cause damage to the world. Is there a difference in terms of the damage of one avera over another? Absolutely. And that's why some averas, there is no punishment. Some averas, malchus. Some averas, capital. Why? Because the more damage you do, the greater it takes to rectify the damage that you've done. So in terms of the fringe benefit or the damage that you've done, yes, there's a difference between mitzvahs and averas. But in terms of the essential quality of what a mitzvah and what avera is, a mitzvah is connection to Hashem, and avera is detachment from Hashem. In that area, there is no difference between one mitzvah and another. And this we learn from Tumah and Tara. Just like Tumah and Tara is absolute, Zois Chukas HaTorah. Take that, pull it out, apply that to the entire Torah, because the entire Torah is essentially Hashem's ratzon, and that applies to the entire Torah also. And this is very important perspective in life. Very important perspective in the Torah, in the mitzvahs, understanding that a mitzvah, whichever mitzvah you may be doing, it's not about the particular spiritual benefit. It's about connection to Hashem, and that's across the board, any mitzvah. Any avera that's done, again, at that moment, to put it in simple terms, you've stepped out of your marriage with Hashem. It doesn't make a difference what it is. It doesn't make a difference which avera you did. You just turned your back on Hashem, stepped away from the marriage. At that moment, you're detached. The question becomes, however, can we live in such an absolutist way? Can we live a life in black and white without any gray? Can we live a life in which every single mitzvah is the same and every single avera is the same? And the Rebbe in the Sichos, the Rebbe concedes that we can't go living our daily life this way. In our daily life, there is this mitzvah and this avera. There's what's better, there's what's worse. We can't completely deny the benefits and the seichel and the mind. However, there are certain times when we're supposed to take some moments to reflect and focus on the essence of what a mitzvah is, Zois Chukas HaTorah, the essence of what avera is. And those times give us perspective also for the other times in life when we step out of our black and white box. And they give us an understanding of what a mitzvah is and what an avera is. And the Rebbe says that every single year when it comes along Parshas Chukas, when we read this in the Torah, this is a time, Taka, for us to reflect a little on Zois Chukas HaTorah, reflect on the essential character of mitzvahs, the essential character of Averos, reinforce and refresh our desire to be connected to Hashem always and never to detach, and the residue of that, or the impression of that contemplation that we have on Parshas Chukas and other special times of the year, leaves its impact on the entire year and on the rest of our Avodah.